State's next witness, please.
State would call Brandon Boudreaux.
Only swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth.
All right, now the witness has been placed under oath. I'm just going to inquire. The court does have an exclusionary order. In fact, Mr. Boudreaux, have you observed any of the trial testimony in this case since it began?
I have not.
All right, have you talked to anybody else about the testimony they've given in trial?
I have not.
All right, Mr. Wood, then you can proceed with your direct examination.
Thank you. And Your Honor, before I do, I apologize. I should have asked for this from the court earlier. If I could be handed State's Exhibit 9.
Okay, we'll get that to you.
Good morning.
Morning.
Can you state your name and spell it for the record?
My name is Brandon Boudreaux. Brandon. Boudreaux is Boudreaux.
Mr. Boudreaux, are you married?
I am.
Are you on a first or second marriage?
I'm in my second marriage.
I want to ask you a few questions about your first marriage. Who were you married to?
Melanie, she was Cope and then became Boudreaux.
And in your marriage with Melanie Boudreaux, did you have any children?
I did. I had 4.
And, what are their ages?
14, 10, 8, and 7.
And how long were you married to Melanie Boudreaux?
I was married to her for about 10 years.
Right. And you mentioned earlier that her maiden name was Cope.
It was, yes.
And are you aware of her current last name?
Pulowski.
What year did you marry Melanie?
2008.
And during that time, did you have occasion to meet her family?
Yes, I did.
I want to specifically ask about, did you meet the Cox family?
Yes, I did.
And who were they in relation to Melanie Boudreaux?
They would have been her birth mom's family, extended family.
And who in that family did you meet?
I met Janice and Barry Cox, Adam Cox, Summer Shiflett, Lori Vallow, and Alex Cox.
And so what was Lori Vallow's relation to Melanie Boudreaux?
She would have been Melanie's aunt.
And what was Alex Cox's relationship to her?
He would have been her uncle.
So they were your aunt and uncle-in-law?
Yeah.
Did you spend much time with Melanie's family?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time together.
In what capacity would you spend time with them?
We spent holidays together. When they lived close to us, we probably see each other once a month. When they were more distant, we would travel to each other's houses and stay for a week or 2 at a time. And then we do trips together. We went to Disneyland a lot together.
And I asked that kind of broadly about her family. Did you have occasion to spend much time with Lori Vallow and Charles Vallow?
That Lori and her kids and my kids, we would go to Disneyland a lot. We would hang out a lot. We did a lot of things together. It was just kind of part of our lives.
Okay. And I said Charles Vallow at that time. Was Lori Vallow married to Charles Vallow?
Yes.
And how well did you get to know Lori and Charles?
I would say pretty well, very well.
And you mentioned your family spent time together. You said you went to Disneyland?
Yeah.
And would you spend holidays together?
Yeah, often.
Would your children spend time with her children?
Yeah, my son Braxton was very good friends with JJ. They kind of bonded, and my daughter as well. Right.
And how old was Braxton as compared to JJ?
He's a couple years older.
And were you aware that JJ had some special needs?
Yeah. JJ had autism. Everybody who was around him, it was easy to tell. Early on, when he was younger, he was nonverbal for a while, and so he had like all this energy, but he didn't know how to use it. So you just had to be prepared for that. You set your house up for it when he'd come over to our house, or when you went to Lori and Charles. They spent a lot of time making sure that it was a safe place for him, and that everything was kind of handled for that. And then as he got older, he started learning how to talk, and he could say things. And similarly, he would rephrase things over and over. When he wanted to play with my son, he'd always say, go to Braxy, and he called my daughter Fridays instead of Bridie. So Braxy and Fridays, Braxy and Fridays. But
And so you said Braxton was a good playmate for JJ.
yeah,
Did your family spend time with Tylee Ryan?
yeah.
Tell me about your relationship with Tylee Ryan.
She's a good girl. She was, I knew her from when she was little, and then all the way up into being a teenager. And so she was a normal teenager. She had her moments where she just wanted to sleep in late and no one to bug her, watch too much Netflix, and other times where she'd open up and she was sweet, and you got to know the real Tylee. So you got a little bit of both.
And did she interact with your children as well?
She did, yeah. Often would babysit them, or she was a little older than my kids, so she would naturally be kind of more of a, she had good motherly instincts, with them.
Did you ever observe Tylee with JJ?
Yeah, she was very protective of him.
And did you know Colby Ryan?
Yeah, I do.
Speaking of Tylee, did you yourself have any special sort of religious connection to Tylee Ryan?
I did. I baptized her.
Okay. And when you baptized her, what church was that in?
In the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
And so to your knowledge, Tylee and her family were members of that church?
Yes.
I want to talk a little bit about Melanie Boudreaux and Lori Vallow. Did you have occasion to observe their relationship?
Yes, I did.
And was that over a span of years?
Yes.
What was that relationship like?
Melanie's mom died when she was young, and she had an awesome stepmom, but I think she also looked a lot to Lori as a mother figure. So she, in our marriage, at least, she was very easily influenced by wanting to do things. That's why we went always to Disneyland with Lori. It was just kind of, she always wanted to be like Lori, and spent a lot of time looking for her acceptance. And
you testified that you indeed spent a lot of time with them.
Yes.
Did you know Charles Vallow?
Yes.
Did you have a relationship with Charles Vallow?
Yeah, we had a really good relationship.
Tell us about that. What made that a good relationship?
Um, we just had similar personalities. I think both of us, we loved what we did for work. We loved owning businesses and selling. And he was very much a producer mentality type of a person. And besides that, I think we both loved our faith and had a lot of gratitude that we had. I think of us spending time just talking about how grateful we were to have our families and be in a position where we were in life.
And you said you had some common ground in business. What did you do for work?
I worked I built a direct TV sales organization, and he owned, he did life insurance.
You'd mentioned traveling to each other's homes. Where did that happen?
It depended throughout, that 10 years is a long time. And so they moved, they never owned their houses. They rented and they moved a little bit more often. And so they lived in Hawaii for parts of the time, and we would travel out to Hawaii to see them. Other times they lived blocks from us in Arizona. I lived in Arizona throughout that whole time.
And would they sometimes stay at your house when they came back from Hawaii?
Yes. Yeah. When I was first married, Lori actually came up and stayed with us in Utah as well when I had a place there.
And yeah, I believe you mentioned that you would spend holidays together sometimes.
Yeah. Often like Christmas, Thanksgiving, major holidays, we'd end up meeting at somebody's house and doing it together.
Do you recall the last Christmas that your family, the Boudreaux family, and the Charles and Lori Vallow family spent together?
Yeah, it would have been 2018.
And was that a typical Christmas?
No, it was different.
Why was it different?
Um, in 2018, our families were changing. That particular Christmas, I wasn't as aware of everything that was going on. But when we went there, when you spend that much time together all the time, you don't have to say anything. You just know from each other's body language. And when you show up places, when you do things, it's just, you always feel welcome. You feel loved. You feel close. It's like you can pick up right where you left off. And that Christmas, when I was over at Lori's house, there just felt like a lot of distance. There was, and usually just the family. It was just like the Coxes and the Boudreaux. And that Christmas, there was someone named Melanie Gibb who was there. Who, she was a stranger to me, so it was kind of different to have a stranger at Christmas. And there was really not very much conversation with me, and a lot less focus on my kids and the kids that Christmas.
So when you say less focus from who?
From Lori.
And uh, how was her interaction with you and your family different than before?
Yeah. Lori was pretty like doting. When my kids would come over, she would make them feel loved. She would, just try to spoil them with presents and attention. And that was kind of her way of letting people know that she noticed them. And that didn't happen that Christmas.
So it was markedly different.
Yeah.
Did you observe Lori and your wife, Melanie, at that party?
Yes.
Do you recall what their interaction was?
Um, I I remember leaving afterwards and talking to my wife about how it felt different because it felt so different, and her telling me that nothing felt different at all. Um, so I would say that she felt like it was fine and normal, and it didn't seem to her like it did to me.
Okay. Around this time, were you and your wife active in your church?
Yes.
And When I say active in your church, did you regularly attend church meetings?
Yeah, usually every Sunday, unless there's something going on.
And had your family and the Charles and Lori Vallow family, had you ever shared religious activities with them?
Yeah, like I said, I baptized Tylee. We talked about church openly amongst us.
Around that time, so we're talking about the end of 2018, did your wife's activity in religious events change?
Um, yeah, in the fall of 2018, earlier in my marriage, uh, she just didn't love going to church. It wasn't her thing. I liked going to church, so I was kind of the advocate. I would push a little more. But in the fall of 2018, she got very excited about religion and going to church, and she started talking about how she set this goal that she was going to go to the temple every single day.
Okay. And so around the fall of 2018, her attitudes appeared to change.
Yes.
Uh, and you said she wanted to go to the temple every day. What did you think of that?
Um, in our faith, it's going to the temple is definitely something that's important to us. It's a way to kind of to go through a process to remind yourself of promises that you make to God. It's kind of ritualistic, but for me, it's a great thing to do in moderation. You know, I might go once a month, and I think that's kind of a normal thing for a person. If they set a goal, they go once a month and just kind of remember, hey, I committed to God to give my life to certain principles. But when it's pretty rare for someone to go every day, it's a lot, especially for a mom with kids at home and a lot of other things that we had as responsibilities. And so it was surprising, I think would probably be the right word. But also for me at the time, I wanted to be supportive. I wanted to show that, you know, I could meet her where she was and help her try to figure things out.
And just for clarity's purpose, in your faith, is going to the temple the same thing as going to church? What most people think of as going to church?
No.
What's the difference?
Um, Going to the temple is something we do once for ourselves. That very first time to make promises to God. It's like being baptized. You know, we go once for ourselves. We make promises to God, um, and then each time you go afterwards, you do it for someone who's passed on. But it's something that's kind of viewed, like I said, it's maybe a once a month thing, or I mean, going regularly is healthy, and I think a good part of anybody who wants to find a rhythm for their religion. But going every day would maybe be something somebody did if they were retired and they just had nothing else to do.
But going to the temple is not your regular Sunday services.
No, we go to a regular Sunday service every Sunday at a church building.
Thank you to clarify that. And so this was, I think you said in the fall of 2018 that these changes started taking place.
Yes.
In addition to this daily temple attendance, what else changed in your wife's religious demeanor or attitude?
Um, you know, at that time she started going to these things that she was calling firesides, but weren't things that I would call a fireside.
Okay, so let's clarify that. In your church, if someone says fireside, what do you normally think of?
So inside of our faith, there's a leader of like a group we call it a ward. So like a group of people who live in a certain geographic area. And so inside your ward, that leader's name is a bishop, and him or one of the other people, like the counselors in the leadership group, at times they might, besides going to church on Sunday, they might set up a meeting that they think might lift us up or encourage us spiritually. And it might be outside the normal times you go. And so they usually do them in the evenings, and they call them firesides. That's something that, you know, you get together. it's under the direction of the church, and ideally it's uplifting. It's something that's going to bring you closer to, your commitments you made when you're baptized to try to follow the Savior.
Okay, and you said that Melanie Boudreaux, there's multiple Melanies in this case, so I'm going to keep referring to her as Melanie Boudreaux, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine.
And so Melanie Boudreaux, she started going to what I believe you testified, what she called firesides, correct?
Correct.
And were these different than what you would normally call a fireside?
Yeah, so I kind of just described what I think of as a fireside, but she was just going to people's houses, and they were doing meetings that weren't under direction of anybody from the church. And oftentimes they were focused on things that aren't things we talk about normally in church. Some of them were just,
What kind of things?
I mean, I didn't go to them, so I can't say what exactly was talked about, but I can share what came back from them, which was what made me concerned. She came home one time and wanted to get like $10,000 worth of food storage all at once because she was really concerned about the end of the end of times coming, the end of the world coming. And it just didn't seem very practical to me, and then there was other focuses that she would come home with. She had a fascination with like Jesus Christ and did he have a family, and why was James's name the beloved? A lot of early Christian, early church things. And so I would share perspective, but I was also I kind of tried to share with her my perspective on. I served a mission for my church for a couple of years, and I saw some people who fell away from it, and I shared something that I had noticed in that process that those people got really focused on not the core of believing in finding faith in Jesus Christ, but they got focused on things that were really far away from that, and it led to them falling away from the core of their faith.
And you said that you never attended any of these, can I use the phrase alternative firesides?
Yeah, that's fun. No, I did not attend any of them.
Did you ever attempt to?
I did ask if I could, mostly because I wanted to see what was going on in there so I could give her better perspective, but she let me know I wasn't welcome at them.
So she didn't let you go with her.
Yeah, she told me I wasn't welcome to come.
Do you know if Lori Vallow was at any of those firesides?
Yeah, I do. She's the one who invited her to them initially.
So coming back to winter of 2018, if it's fair to say that your testimony, your wife's religious fervor has changed, and you had this awkward Christmas party. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Did the situation, and you've testified that your relationship between the Chad and Lori family and your family was close. Did the situation between your family and Charles and Lori's family change around that time?
A little bit after, right after in the new year, beginning of the new year, there was a period where Lori, she did send a message to the family telling them that her accusation was Charles was cheating on her, and that because of this, she locked. She took all the money out of their bank account. She stole Charles's truck, changed the locks on their house. It was very irrational to me.
And when was this?
It would have been like the end of January of 2019.
And how did you respond to that situation?
Initially I didn't even know about it. I think she called everybody, but my phone was blocked from Charles, so I couldn't hear from him at all. I found out later that Melanie must have blocked him in my phone, but
Just to be clear, Charles Vallow's contact was blocked on your phone.
yes, and I didn't do it. And the only other person who had access was my wife.
Okay. And so you were talking about how you reacted to this situation of, I guess you could say, a breakup between Lori and Charles.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one when you're that close with people. And everybody in the family kind of got drug in and involved in it because it was messy. As far as like Charles really didn't want it to happen. He wasn't looking for it. He was trying to make sure it didn't happen. He was sending us as a group regular emails to try to contact us and work through it and try to communicate, because Lori just kind of cut him off after all that. She just stopped talking to him. She actually left him with JJ and just disappeared for a while.
Do you know where she went?
I don't
But she didn't take JJ with her.
know.
Do you know how old JJ was at the time?
I can't remember right now. It's been a long time.
But he was still a young child.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't leave JJ. JJ had to be watched all the time. You couldn't leave him alone. He was, when you're watching JJ, it's your whole life. Like, you have to plan everything around it. I mean, just for him to come visit, you have to plan everything around it.
And you stated that the whole family got drug in. Did your wife take a position on taking a side?
Yeah, when it happened, I wanted us to not take a side, and divorces are just messy, like there's nothing anybody can do about, like, when you've been together for a long time and you're trying to separate both emotionally, gonna have a hard time going through the process. And so my encouragement was that we didn't pick a side, and we just loved them both, and then made sure that the kids knew that they had somewhere where they could be safe, and our house could be that. But Melanie just kept saying how she was uncomfortable with Charles, and she didn't.
Microphone, please.
We're getting into some hearsay, and Judge, I've been patient, but the narrative is getting a little lengthy now, so I'm going to object on narrative and hearsay at this point.
Sustained.
Okay. Did Melanie Boudreaux demand that your family take a side?
Objection, hearsay.
That's a request, Your Honor. A request is not hearsay.
That is overruled. You can answer.
Yes, she did.
And did you respect Melanie's wishes on that?
I did my best.
And was that because she was your wife?
Yeah, I wanted to stay married. It was really important to me.
And so we've kind of moved on now to the beginning of 2019. Is that accurate to say in
Yes.
these events that you're talking about?
Yeah.
Did you see Lori Vallow much in early of 2019?
Not at all.
And I believe, I don't want to misstate what you said. It was your understanding that she had left.
Yeah, I don't know where, because I didn't have any contact, and it didn't seem like anyone else did. But
Did you see Charles Vallow at all during that time?
I did a few times. We would agree for JJ to come over, play with my kids, and so he would come over.
Okay. And Lori was never with him?
Never.
And was she with JJ?
No.
But Charles would come over and bring JJ to the house.
Yeah.
And what would JJ do at your house?
He would just come play with my son. He would, they play video games as long as he could keep his attention on it. Sometimes he just bounce from one thing to another. He'd be all over the house. Braxton would kind of keep his eye on him and play with him. He knew JJ was special, and so he kind of kept that assignment. Before JJ came over, you'd prep it. You know, we put like little stoppers on the top of all the doors out or whatever to make sure he would try to sneak outside. And then it was, I mean, he's so fast that you had to be prepared. So you'd pre-plan some of that stuff before he came over, make sure it was ready for him. And then, but Braxton would kind of keep his eye on him, and I would usually at that time, I'd sit and talk to Charles.
Okay. What would you speak with Charles about?
I mean, you can imagine someone going through a divorce they didn't want to go through. He was pretty, I don't know what the right words are, distraught, sad, overwhelmed. It was a lot for him.
Are you aware if at any time there was an attempt at reconciliation between Charles and Lori?
Yeah, I think Charles tried to reconcile. I actually think he stopped at the divorce. He always said that he was going to make it work.
Sustain.
I'm gonna move forward to the summer of 2019. Did you have an occasion to take a trip to your in-laws' house?
I did, yeah.
And do you recall when that was?
It would have been in June of 2018.
Do you recall the exact date or approximately when in June?
The week of June, like 23rd, 25th, something like that.
What was your purpose for going to your in-laws?
My wife's younger sister was getting married.
And while you were there, did anything out of the ordinary happen?
Yes,
What was that?
a few things, but the first thing that happened is my grandfather died of a heart attack.
Okay. And were you expecting that?
No,
And so you're at your wife's family's house when you got the news?
I was actually with my parents. We took my family, went to, decided to go to church with my mom and my dad, because they still live in the same place where I had left for my mission on. And we were actually just sitting in the pews right before church started, and my dad got a phone call, and he never gets up and takes his phone calls in church. So he got up and he left. And he came back and he waved us all out. Said,
Your Honor, I apologize.
Go ahead. It's sustain, as you're saying.
It's just some foundation, so I can move on at this point.
Very well.
Did you have any conversations about your grandfather's death with your wife, Melanie?
yes, after he passed away, I waited a day or two. My mom called me to tell me when the funeral was, and I told her that when it was and that I wanted us all to go, and she told me she wasn't going to go.
Sustained, and I'll strike that final part of the response, what was said.
All right. At this point, were you still at your in-laws' home?
Yes,
And did you have a disagreement with your wife over whether or not to attend your grandfather's funeral?
yes,
Did you want to go to your father's funeral, your grandfather's funeral?
Overruled. You can continue, Mr. Wood.
yes. I wanted to go to my grandfather's funeral, and I wanted my family to.
While you were having this discussion with your wife, did that escalate into any other type of conversation?
Yes, it escalated into a conversation and an argument that didn't make any sense to me.
What was it about?
Well, she started bringing Lori into this argument, which had nothing to do with what we were talking about. She said that God had.
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. It's hearsay.
You're right.
Response, Mr. Wood.
Your Honor, I believe it comes in for the effect on the listener, not for the truth of the matter.
Well, I think just the specific statements are hearsay beyond that, so I'll sustain the objection.
Without saying what the words your wife used, what was the context of that conversation?
We had an argument about whether or not I hacked Lori Vallow's computer.
Did your wife accuse you of hacking Lori Vallow's computer?
Yes,
Did she request that you admit that you hacked into her computer?
yes, she said that I had to.
Judge, I'm going to object again.
Your Honor,
Sustain.
Your Honor, if I might briefly argue, a request is not hearsay.
Well, a request, if it's calling for specific statements of the party not here for cross, would be hearsay. So I'm not saying you can't answer, but in terms of specifically what was said, that's where the ruling stands.
All right. Thank you. So that accusation was made.
Yes.
What was your reaction to that?
I just felt really frustrated. I had no idea why we were even talking about it. It had nothing to do with what I was trying to get through to her and what I was trying to talk about. It was like this thing that didn't make any sense to me.
Without going into any specific statements, did Melanie Boudreaux provide any context for why she thought you'd hacked into Lori Vallow's computer?
Judge, it's going to call for hearsay.
Overruled.
Can you ask that question one more time?
Without providing any of the statements she said, did Melanie Boudreaux provide any context for why she thought or why she was accusing you of hacking into Lori Vallow's computer?
Can you ask that one more time? I want to answer it properly.
Sorry, it's probably complicated.
Yeah.
Was there any reason given why she thought you had hacked into Lori Vallow's computer?
Judge, response calls for hearsay.
Overruled.
No.
Just a bare accusation.
Yeah.
To be clear, Mr. Boudreaux, did you ever hack into Lori Vallow's computer?
No.
Did, in this conversation, did Melanie Boudreaux inform you of anything that God had revealed to her
Judge,
in relation to this divorce?
Judge, I'm going to object. This is leading.
On leading, that's overruled.
Yeah, the argument continued to progress, and I guess she actually specifically said that God had told her.
Judge, I'm going to object. It's hearsay.
It is hearsay.
Your Honor, that this statement is not coming in for the truth of the matter. It's just simply to show the argument and the effect on the listener.
All right, and again, for that purpose, it's not hearsay, but any specific statements where they're not subject to cross, I'm finding are hearsay.
Yeah. Without saying the specific statement she said, what did she accuse you of?
Of being gay and of hacking her Aunt Lori's computer.
And what was your response to those accusations?
I mean, all of the emotions you would think you'd feel after 10 years married to somebody. Disappointment, frustration, a lot of grief, a lot of grief.
Did you have any idea that she would make an accusation of homosexuality against you?
No. I mean, I had a thought that it might happen because of something Charles had said, but no, I never would have believed it.
So you have, is it fair to call it an argument?
Yeah.
How did it end?
Yeah, I mean, it took a long time. It started in the afternoon. It went past midnight, and she went to bed. I just stayed up troubled all night.
Did you send a text to Charles and Lori that night?
I did. I was really frustrated about this whole thing being involved in my relationship with my wife. So I sent it.
It's becoming a narrative. It's non-responsive.
Overruled.
So I sent a text to Charles and Lori both, telling them that if my family was broken up and my marriage ruined, it was on them.
Did you ever hear from Lori in response to that?
No,
Did you hear from Charles in response to that?
I did.
When approximately was that?
Um, a little bit later, a lot was going on at that time, so I couldn't say like a specific time, but I ended up talking to him on the phone.
Would you say this? Is it fair to say we're still in the late June?
Yeah, it was like the next day, probably at like in the evening.
And what was that conversation like?
He just apologized for everything.
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. It's calling for hearsay.
Sustain.
What did you say to Charles?
I just apologized to him, told him I was really sorry about not being there more for him, because now I was feeling like I know he must have felt. And he just, he was really gracious.
Was that the last time you spoke with Charles Vallow?
It was.
After Charles Vallow died, did you have any contact with Lori Vallow?
No, I did not.
After Charles died, did you have any contact with JJ Vallow?
No, I did not.
And after Charles died, did you have any contact with Tylee Ryan?
No, I did not.
After Charles Vallow died, what happened with your relationship with your wife?
Oh, we got divorced.
When did that happen, approximately?
We started the divorce right after my grandfather's funeral, but it takes a little while. So we got a mediator right after and signed all the documents. And I moved her into a rental house, and then I think it finalized in October.
Okay. In that process, was there any the home that you and Melanie lived in, did you sell it?
I did.
And did she move to another location?
She did. I helped her get a rental home.
And did you move to another location? I
did. I ended up getting a rental home as well.
Approximately when did you get that rental home?
I got it. I found out the house was sold like the end of September. It looked like it was going to sell. And so I went and found a rental home at that time.
Right. And where was, don't go into specifics of neighborhoods, but what city was this in?
Gilbert, Arizona.
Okay. And is that where you had been living the last several years?
Yeah, I moved back.
And so did you, you located a property that, was it close to the home that you and Melanie had been living in?
Yes.
And why was that?
I wanted to make sure my kids had stability. I was really worried about all of the changes.
And were you sharing custody with Melanie at this time?
I was.
What was the situation between you and Melanie like at this point, at the end of September, beginning of October of 2019?
It had changed quite a bit. Since June, she just stopped talking to me. And we could text, but barely. There was no connection anymore, and she's very cold to me.
At this point, did you know where Lori Vallow was?
No,
Is it fair to say that probably wasn't the first thing on your mind,
yeah,
but you hadn't heard from her
no,
and you hadn't heard from Tylee or JJ?
no.
So we've been speaking about this, your situation with your wife, Melanie Boudreaux, at the end of September, beginning of October. Did anything happen at the beginning of October of 2019 that affected that situation?
Yes,
What was that?
on October 2nd of 2019, someone parked in front of my house and shot at me and tried to kill me.
Okay, let's talk about that. October 2nd, you said?
Yes.
Let's go to the kind of the beginning of the day. How did your day start?
I woke up. I had all my kids at my house, so I got them ready for school, and then I got them out the door. We did our normal stuff: breakfast, prayer, and then I dropped the older two at school, and the younger one, the second youngest, at a preschool, and then I dropped my youngest at Melanie's house.
After you dropped your kids off, where did you go next?
Then I went to the gym.
This is all in that same area, Gilbert, Arizona.
Yes.
And after the gym, where did you go?
Then I drove back to my house, and as I was driving around, my house is a couple of houses in on the street, so I made a left in onto the street. And as I was driving, I noticed a few things. My house, the driveway, there was like a Jeep parked right on the edge of it, where I would normally turn in, and there was nothing parked there usually. I'd only been there for a few days, but so far it was always there was this van there, and like the Jeep was parked with its like bumper basically on the van, and it just looked at that place. It had a Texas license plate. There was no tire on the back of the Jeep, and you know how when you open and close a Jeep, there's like little tabs on the window. Those were sitting on the outside of it. So it just looked awkward, just was awkward enough that I noticed it right as I turned around the corner.
Okay. So you noticed the Jeep.
Mhm.
Did you notice anybody inside of it?
I couldn't tell if there was anybody inside of it. This all happened in such, imagine coming around a corner, driving a couple house lengths. So it all happened very quickly. And then the window opened up, and I saw a gun and a silencer. And I would my window shattered. I heard a bang, all kind of in the same amount of time. And my immediate thought was just, I'm getting shot at. And instead of turning my wheel and into my driveway, I just pushed the gas and drove straight forward.
What happened after that?
I drove to where my street ended, and there was a turn, and kind of as I came up to that part, I remember grabbing my phone, calling 911, talking to the operator. I went and pulled a little bit around, and there was like a little community pool there, and I kind of parked in front of it for a second. And there's like a loop between my street and the street above me, and I remember I could see on that loop. I saw that Jeep start to come around the corner, and then it did a U-turn and went the other way. And I think I started to follow it at first, and then I think
Were you on the phone with 911 during this time?
Yes, yeah, the whole time I was talking to an operator.
And you just said, if I understand correctly, that you started following the Jeep.
Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. I mean, at the moment, but
Did you notify 911 that that's what you were doing?
yeah, and they told I believe they told me to pull around and park in front of my house. So I did, and then they told me to wait for police, and they came shortly thereafter.
I believe you testified, correct me if I'm wrong, that you had only been in this house for a few days.
Yes.
Um, how many people had you told that you were in this house?
Almost nobody. It would happen very quickly because I wasn't supposed to be able to get my kids as soon as I was, but my wife had agreed to let me have them sooner. And so I had moved everything out of the house that was selling to get them in so I could have them for that weekend with me in my house because I mean, I would do anything to keep my kids with me. And
So when Melanie Boudreaux, you were there, had you told anybody else?
so I had to tell her when I got the place. I hadn't told anybody else, but my neighbors had seen me moving and they helped me move. So they knew where I was, just the ones that lived by me there.
So had you told any other friends and family yet this was your new residence?
Just hadn't had time to tell anybody yet. It was so quick, and then I had my kids.
So did law enforcement show up?
Yes,
And did you notify them of what had happened?
yeah, I told them everything that I could.
And when you said your window had shattered, is that your driver's side front window?
Yes, the bullet had lodged up in like the door frame, which I didn't know in the moment, but later you could see where it had hit, and it was just right above like where my head would be.
And did you describe the Jeep to law enforcement?
Yes,
And did you follow up with law enforcement after that?
yes. When you go through something like that, I mean, you spend all day. It feels like with law enforcement, it takes a really long time. So at some point, like a detective came over, I talked to him, and then later, as I was thinking through everything and talking with other people that were close to it, I realized that I felt really confident that the Jeep was Tylee's Jeep.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Were you aware that Tylee Ryan had a Jeep?
Yes,
Did you know how long she'd had it?
Charles got it for her during all of this, when he was in Texas, he'd gotten her Jeep.
So when he was in Texas, was that in 2019?
Yes,
And you had seen that Jeep.
yes,
And so I don't want to put words in your mouth. Your testimony is that as you reflected on it, you thought more and more that this was Tylee's Jeep.
yeah. I think I might have called Zach Cox and talked to him too, and he might have had the same thought, and we both were just like, "That's got to be the Jeep."
Who is Zach Cox?
Adam Cox, Lori's brother. It's his son. He had lived with Lori and Charles for a period of time, and with me. He's 18, 19 at the time, so he just kind of out on his own. He was working for me. I had given him a job.
Did you take any other steps to identify that Jeep?
Yeah, I was an insurance agent at the time, and previously Charles had given us the VIN number, and so I just gave that VIN number to law enforcement.
And okay, so you had the VIN number for Tylee Ryan's Jeep,
Yeah, yeah,
and that's the number you provided to law enforcement.
yeah.
And just to be clear, you had that because you were insuring that Jeep.
I didn't end up insuring it. He had just given us all the information. Charles had.
Okay.
So
Your Honor, I don't know what time the court wants to take the mid-morning break.
This is probably about good time to do it, Mr. Wood.
Okay.
All right, so we will take our mid-morning recess. Remind the jurors, please, not to discuss the case amongst yourselves on the break or with anyone else. We will return to the courtroom here in about 30 minutes, maybe a little less if we can.
All right, please.
Hey, here we are at a break. Woof. Oh my goodness. So